Ipananadhana Iparanadhana Madana Manahara Kaliya Damana Vidhana Samati Nandana Brajabadanagara Namaya Harinam.
Pushkar Prabhu ingressou em 1970 e vem servindo Srila Prabhupada por muitos anos, principalmente pintando as belas pinturas do Bhagavatam e do Chaitanya Charitamrita. Ele também é um pregador esperto que está sempre ocupado em pregar a consciência de Krishna, principalmente aqui nos Estados Unidos. Thank you everybody. We have Pushkar Prabhu. He joined in 1970 and he had association with Prabhupada many times while painting the beautiful paintings of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srimad Bhagavatam. He is also an expert preacher who is always spreading Krishna consciousness through his art and his preaching. Thank you, Prabhu, for participating. Obrigado, Prabhu, por participar. First, I would like to ask you to give us a brief explanation how you joined the Hare Krishna movement. Eu gostaria que você explicasse um pouco como você ingressou no movimento Hare Krishna.
Yeah, well, the one we brief, since I mean, it can be said brief, but actually it was unfolding over several years.
Eu entrei, mas foi assim aos poucos, durante vários anos.
For one thing, Hare Krishna was being chanted even before Prabhupada came to U.S.
Uma coisa é que o mantra Hare Krishna estava sendo cantado mesmo antes de Srila Prabhupada vir para os Estados Unidos.
In a limited way by...
de uma maneira limitada.
For instance, mainly Allen Ginsberg, he was a beatnik poet.
Principalmente Allen Ginsberg, ele era um poeta.
But of course his chanting was not very clear. It was, you know.
Mas o seu canto não era muito claro.
And I remember I chanted at least once with him before.
Eu lembro que eu pelo menos cantei uma vez com ele.
Before I had anything to do with before I saw Prabhupada or any devotee chanting.
Antes de eu ver Srila Prabhupada ou qualquer devoto cantando.
It might have been 1965, might have been about 1964 or 5, but
possivelmente foi em 1964, 65. Was it in New York City?
New
Foi
York,
em Nova York?
Yes, New York.
Foi em Nova York, da onde Pushkar vem, que nasceu em Nova York.
Mostly I was a political activist and artist. And,
eu era principalmente um ativista político e artista.
Those days against the war, against the imperialism.
Naqueles dias contra a guerra do Vietnã, contra o imperialismo.
And so, when first time I clearly remember seeing Srila Prabhupada was.
A primeira vez que eu lembro claramente de ver Srila Prabhupada foi.
It would have been 1967.
1967, no começo.
But although my mother says she saw Prabhupada in Tompkins Square, my parents used to always be in that area. But they said I also saw, but I don't remember.
Meus pais sempre costumavam estar na área do Tompkins Square, onde Prabhupada cantava, e eles me contaram que eles viram Srila Prabhupada lá e que eu também vi, mas eu não me lembro disso.
I probably saw devotees walking down the street because I used to, in fact, you can say.
Eu provavelmente vi devotos andando pela rua.
I realized some years ago that I had been in Prabhupada's building in the Matchless Gifts on 2nd Avenue 2 years before Prabhupada was even there.
Eu lembro de estar no edifício Matchless Gift, no 26 da 2ª Avenida, 2 anos antes de Prabhupada estar naquele prédio.
I had one friend who was an artist and he lived in the apartment above Prabhupada. And
eu tinha um amigo que também era artista, ele viveu no apartamento acima do apartamento de Prabhupada.
And I actually called him up a few years ago, found out, I mean, he hardly remembered me, but it so happened that he lived in a tiny little place with 4 kids and 2 parents till he was 35 years old, and he used to collect the rent from Prabhupada.
E esse amigo dele, ele telefonou para o amigo há pouco tempo, e o amigo quase nem lembrava mais dele, mas o amigo lembra que, quando ele tinha 35 anos, ele coletava o aluguel de Prabhupada.
His name was Paul Lapaglia,
O nome dele era Paul Paglia.
but he was not interested at all in Krishna consciousness.
Mas ele não estava nem um pouco interessado na consciência de Krishna.
So I didn't speak much on the phone with him because he realized, I told him that famous Swami lived in your place, you know. And so anyway, that's another thing. So in 1967,
Em 1967,
there was one theater engagement. There was a theater just across from the temple on 2nd Avenue.
havia teatro do outro lado do templo da Segunda Avenida.
At that time, there was one guy running for the mayor of New York, a
Tinha uma
hippie.
pessoa que estava se elegendo para ser o governador de Nova York.
He was a hippie.
O prefeito de Nova York, desculpa. Ele era hippie.
So, because I was in a theater group, a guerrilla theater group, I came there with my group. Wasn't my group, but I was in the group to do one small skit, one small.
E eu era parte do grupo de teatro e eu vim nesse teatro com o meu grupo para fazer uma apresentação.
At that time, Prabhupada came. It was only just one block and across the street.
Era só do outro lado da rua que estava o Matchless Gift, 26 da Segunda Avenida.
But so Prabhupada only came with Brahmananda and Kirtanananda.
Prabhupada apareceu com Brahmananda e Kirtanananda.
And he spoke very little.
Ele falou só um pouco.
Mostly he just chanted.
E a maioria do tempo ele só cantou.
He said, "This is a transcendental sound vibration. Everyone should chant." You know,
Essa é
like
uma vibração transcendental e todo mundo deve cantar.
And but I thought, what does this mean, transcendental?
Eu fiquei pensando na minha cabeça, o que é isso? Transcendental,
I thought
vibração
about
transcendental. Eu pensei,
yes, I thought about it for some time.
pensei por algum tempo,
What can this mean? But
o que
then I
pode ser
forgot.
que isso significa? E depois eu deixei para lá.
But it was a mystery because I didn't understand what is transcendental.
Mas
mean.
era mistério para mim, porque eu não conseguia entender o que era essa vibração transcendental.
So the next time that I remember, of course, seeing Srila Prabhupada
A
was,
próxima vez que eu lembro ter visto Srila Prabhupada,
I actually lived in San Francisco, 2 blocks from the first.
eu vivi em São Francisco, a 2 blocos do primeiro templo.
Yeah, from First Temple, and Frederick Street is called.
Na Frederick Street, na rua Frederico.
And I don't remember clearly that time seeing Prabhupada.
Eu não lembro claramente naquela época ver Prabhupada.
But
Mas
by some karma,
mas por algum karma,
I lived there,
eu vivi lá.
and a little while later, not only I used to go and take Sunday feast,
Eu costumava ir na festa de domingo,
and many first famous devotees were there,
e
such
muitos devotos famosos estavam lá na época.
like Vishnu Jan,
Jayananda,
Upendra,
Pendra,
Jamuna,
Malati,
and Chidananda,
Chidananda,
and also Narnarayan.
Naranarayan.
So the first one who preached to me, was Upendra.
O primeiro que pregou para mim foi o Pendra, was Prabhupada's secretary.
Yeah, he was Prabhupada's secretary.
Se
And
tornou secretário de Prabhupada.
he knew, I told him I was an artist.
Eu disse para ele, eu sou artista.
So he several times told me I should paint Krishna.
Ele várias vezes me disse, você deve pintar Krishna.
But that time I was painting only some expressionism, abstract.
Eu estava naquela época somente pintando coisas abstratas.
I had very little interest in doing, following what he said. I saw.
Tinha muito pouco interesse em seguir o que ele estava falando para mim.
Then one day I remember he said,
Dia eu
"Look,
me lembro,
very clearly. Now that temple was a little wider than this room and about the same, but maybe 1 or 2, 3 feet wider.
Aquele templo era não mais de 10 metros por 7 metros.
So I was standing in the door near the street.
Eu estava lá na porta de entrada.
And he said, he pointed at Jayananda. Jayananda was sitting there.
O Pendra apontou para Jayananda, que estava sentado. Jayananda, o famoso que iniciou o Ratha
He
Yatra.
was sitting near the deities.
Ele estava sentado perto das deidades. They had deities at that time,
Jagannath
deities.
Yeah.
Eles já tinham deidades de Jagannatha naquela época.
Not so big, but they were there.
Não eram muito grandes, mas estavam lá.
So now Jayananda, he used to say the prayer. Well, let me finish the story. But that time, then Upendra said, "Oh, you can do painting, just like Jayananda." He said he drives a taxi and he gives all the money to Swamiji.
Então ele disse para, o Pendra disse para Pushkar, você pode pintar assim como Jayananda, ele dirige um táxi, é motorista de táxi, mas ele dá toda a sua renda para o Swamiji.
And I remember being a little bit shocked because my idea of a taxi man would not be like this guy Jayananda, because first of all, I'd never heard the word Jayananda, but he was sitting in a half lotus, and he was very, very intense. If you ever saw him chant japa, his brow would be knit, and he was chanting very concentrated, like Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And so that's why I thought I couldn't imagine him being a taxi driver. He looked like some yogi, great yogi.
Então Pushkar viu Jayananda sentado cantando japa na posição de lótus e muito intensamente cantando com as sobrancelhas franzidas. E ele pensou, poxa, eu nunca imaginei um motorista de táxi assim com o nome de Jayananda e sentado assim como um yogi meditando.
Another thing was just after living there. Now, first of all, whenever you took the Sunday feast, I used to tell everybody, you must go to Hare Krishna temple because the prasadam was so good.
O prasadam da festa de domingo era tão bom que toda vez que eu comia prasadam de domingo, eu falava para todo mundo, vocês têm que ir lá comer. Can you describe a little bit?
What it was?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, they would bring the pots out. There was no transfer pot, but they would bring the pots, big pots, cooking pots out in the middle.
Eles traziam as panelas da cozinha no meio da sala.
And there was a madras cloth on the top of the rug. They put it on top.
E tinha pano desse de madras colorido da Índia. They put on top the pots on top of the.
Yeah.
Colocavam os potes em cima daquele pano.
And
as
then
panelas em cima daquele pano.
It seemed like Jayananda used to say the prayer in English. They didn't have Bengali. He would say the senses are a network.
O Jayananda falava a prece Sharira Vidyajal em inglês. Eles não falavam em Bengali na época.
And the prayer was always something very heavy, very impressive to me.
E essa oração era algo assim muito impressionante para mim.
And the prasadam was being cooked by I'm sure Jamuna and Malati were some of the main cooks.
A prasada era feita principalmente por Jamuna, a famosa cozinheira, e Malati.
So it was amazing, and
era impressionante.
So whenever I would see any of my friends, I would say, "Yeah, you should go to Hare Krishna temple and eat there on Sunday. It's amazing prasadam."
E quando eu encontrava com os meus amigos, eu dizia para eles que vocês têm que ir no templo Hare Krishna experimentar essa comida impressionante.
But I wasn't so much attracted to the chanting.
Mas eu não estava muito atraído ao canto.
So I also had some other friends. Just a little after that, I moved up into California in the country.
Depois de um tempo eu mudei para a Califórnia no campo.
And those friends of mine, they used to play the same happening record.
Esses amigos costumavam tocar o primeiro disco que Prabhupada gravou, aquele Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
First record, and so I couldn't really, no way that I could escape Hare Krishna or Krishna.
Não tinha como eu podia me escapar do Hare Krishna. O Hare Krishna estava me seguindo.
I didn't know that those people actually had lived at the New York temple before. I found out years later they actually.
Eu fiquei sabendo dias mais tarde que aquelas mesmas pessoas que estavam comigo haviam vivido no templo de Nova York com Prabhupada.
But they were fanatic, macrobiotic.
Mas eles eram macrobióticos fanáticos.
So they wouldn't eat white sugar or anything.
Eles não comiam açúcar branco, arroz branco.
So they actually were very instrumental to get me away from eating any kind of meat, because I only ate rice and bread and
E na verdade eles me ajudaram a deixar o comer de carne. Eu só comia com eles arroz e pão.
Yeah, so they were fanatic. Anyway, so then skip ahead now.
Agora passando um pouco para frente no tempo.
I have an art book where I explain many of these things, but
eu tenho um livro de arte. Esse é um livro de arte de Pushkar.
Yeah.
Das artes, das pinturas dele.
Windows to the Spiritual World.
Chama Windows to the Spiritual World, janelas para o mundo espiritual, onde ele conta muito disso. Aqui tem muitas das pinturas famosas dele.
On the back. You see more pictures.
Pintura de Prabhupada.
Yeah. Okay, so we can look again after. Yeah. Oh, that's good.
So some sangre down
here. Yeah.
$10.
No.
Vamos fazer pouco de sangre aqui.
So anyway, there was a famous concert where they tried to imitate the Woodstock concert.
Houve concerto famoso chamado Woodstock na área norte, acima de Nova York, e na Califórnia eles queriam imitar esse concerto.
This concert was a failure because
Mas foi uma falha.
Because there was violence.
Porque teve violência.
And this was in December of
Mas foi em dezembro
of 69.
De 1969.
So I moved to Hawaii because I felt the vibration was too bad and contaminated or whatever. It was not my. So I moved to Hawaii.
Eu me mudei para o Hawaii porque eu não gostei daquilo, achei que a vibração não era boa.
So in Hawaii.
Mudei para o Havaí.
But still, I remember I was living in one island, big island of Hawaii.
Mas eu estava vivendo numa ilha, numa grande ilha do Havaí.
I was living one time in one abandoned house.
Certa vez eu estava morando numa casa abandonada.
And I remember there was a guy across the road. He had a house, regular nice house, pretty nice house.
E tinha uma pessoa do outro lado da rua que tinha uma casa bonita.
And one day he came back, I think he had been in Honolulu, and he said to me,
eu acho que ele tinha estado em Honolulu, ele disse para mim.
I used to take a bath in his house, so just when I was.
Eu costumava me banhar na casa dele.
As I was leaving his house.
Quando eu estava saindo da casa dele.
He said to me.
Ele disse para mim.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
And it's funny, I didn't say anything because I just.
Interessante, eu não disse nada.
So, the next thing is that after 4 or 5 months, I went to Maui.
Depois de 4 ou 5 meses eu fui para Maui.
And in Maui, I met the Siddha Swarup group. His name was Sai.
Eu encontrei o grupo de Siddha Swarupa, ele tinha discípulos no Brasil.
His name was Sai.
O nome dele era Sai.
And he was preaching Krishna consciousness by this time.
Ele estava nessa época pregando a consciência de Krishna.
So the first day I joined his ashram.
E no primeiro dia eu entrei no ashram dele.
I spent one night living outside, and then I got tired, and I met those people in Lahaina, and then they said, "Oh, you want to come to the ashram?" And I went back with them, and since that's when I joined, it was April Fools of 1970.
Então esse era o dia 1º de abril de 1970.
They have April Fool in Brazil?
Yeah, they do.
So they know what I mean. So this April Fool means that Krishna fooled me.
Não, esse é o dia dos tolos, das brincadeiras. Então Krishna enganou ele nesse
because
dia.
I may never have joined the mainstream ISKCON, but I joined there because everyone still looked like hippie, although they
Possivelmente eu jamais teria entrado na ISKCON como era daquela época, mas entrei nesse grupo que era de hippies, mas eram devotas.
And we used to do Harinam Sankirtan and chant also 16 rounds.
Nós fazíamos Harinama Sankirtan e cantávamos 16 voltas todos os dias.
But at the same time, it was very nice. And they had in Maui, of course, the soil is very rich, and we had nice gardens. And you could.
Mas ao mesmo tempo tinha plantações, boas plantações. Maui é lugar que a terra é muito rica.
And wonderful fruits are everywhere.
Muitas frutas, tipos de frutas em toda parte.
So after some time, then I went to Honolulu.
Depois de algum tempo eu fui para Honolulu.
And after a few months living there,
depois de alguns poucos meses vivendo ali.
In September, Prabhupada came there.
Em setembro, Prabhupada chegou lá em Honolulu.
To Honolulu ISKCON temple.
Para o templo da ISKCON.
So we went there with about maybe 40 people from Sai's group.
Nós fomos lá com por volta de 40 devotos do grupo do Sai.
And during the lecture,
durante a aula,
Prabhupada said,
Prabhupada disse,
that time he was going to Japan.
Ele na época o Prabhupada estava indo do Havaí para o Japão.
He had sannyasis like Madhuvisa with him. Madhuvisa was leading kirtan in the temple.
Ele tinha sannyasi com ele, Madhuvisa, ele estava liderando o kirtan.
So first thing when Prabhupada came, we came in one exit, but he came in back exit.
Nós entramos de lado do templo e Prabhupada entrou de outro lado.
It was a small room, but very packed.
Era quarto, uma sala pequena, mas tinha muita gente.
So Prabhupada came through one door, and he was cleanly shaven, and somehow he appeared. It looked exactly like he appeared from Vaikuntha, some spiritual planet.
E Prabhupada tinha raspado a cabeça recentemente e ele entrou. E eu vi que ele parecia como uma pessoa que tinha vindo de Vaikuntha, de algum lugar espiritual.
Because the sun was setting just behind his head, and his head was so clean shaven, and his clothes, everything about him was so clean, so pure, that it was shocking.
O sol estava se pondo e a cabeça dele estava raspada, e as suas roupas estavam bem limpas e tudo sobre ele parecia tão limpo, tão puro, era chocante.
Because, like Prabhupada said, we should be revolutionarily clean, which it's very difficult, but Prabhupada, he showed the example. He was so cleanliness next to godliness.
Prabhupada disse que nós temos que ser revolucionariamente limpos. E é muito difícil de ser assim, mas Prabhupada mostrou como isso era possível.
And the first thing he did was,
E a primeira coisa que ele fez foi,
there were some deities, I think they were just very primitive deities, Gauranitai or Panchatattva, and he did full Dandavat obeisances in front.
e tinha umas deidades, was it installed deities or not?
I don't think.
Parece que não eram deidades instaladas, só estavam ali num lugar, mas imediatamente Prabhupada viu as deidades e ofereceu dandavats no chão.
But then, although he obviously was only short, maybe 5'2", 3", when he walked up onto the big Vyasasan, he looked like a king. His whole stature changed.
E tudo isso foi muito rápido, 1, 2, 3, e ele subiu e sentou na Vyasasana, ele parecia como um rei.
And so when he was speaking,
Ele estava falando.
I remember one point I always remembered. He said, "So, if you follow this process, you will see God face to face."
E eu sempre lembro que naquela aula Prabhupada disse, então, se você segue este processo, você vai ver Deus face a face.
So I always remember that.
Eu
And
sempre me lembro desta afirmação.
so that was the second time where I saw Prabhupada.
Esta foi a segunda vez que eu encontrei com Prabhupada. Which year was that?
That's 70.
Foi ainda em 1970.
That's September.
Setembro de 1970.
Okay, so gradually, this is how I was joining. We were chanting with the Siddha group, but there was a big competition going on, and the ISKCON temple was very upset at one point. It's a long story, but do I tell all this detail? I don't know.
No, maybe more.
Just Prabhupada, yeah. So the next time when Siddha finally surrendered all his group.
Finalmente, a Siddha Swarupa entregou, todo o seu grupo se renderam para Prabhupada e se tornaram devotos de Prabhupada, todos os seus 40 discípulos.
He also gave a certain amount of money,
Ele também deu algum dinheiro.
In those days, about $60,000-$80,000, I forget.
Ele deu 60 ou 80 mil dólares.
It was a lot for that.
Era muito dinheiro, ainda mais naquela época.
So he was breaking his group in different parts. So he sent about 12 of us to Los Angeles.
E ele começou a dividir o seu grupo em vários subgrupos. Ele mandou 12 de nós para Los Angeles.
So after being there, I saw the paintings I saw paintings in Krishna book also, but later I saw real paintings in LA Temple.
Eu havia visto pinturas dos devotos no livro de Krishna, mas quando eu me mudei para Los Angeles, eu vi pinturas originais no templo.
But also you can see, although I was not attracted to paint realistically for so many years, but when I saw the Krishna paintings, then I had a very strong, maybe competitive
Change of heart.
Change of heart. Yeah.
Eu não estava inclinado a pintar pinturas realistas, mas quando eu via as pinturas de Krishna, eu tive uma mudança de coração.
But when I was in LA, I was being engaged just to paint Parampara paintings for all the West Coast temples. There was about 4 or 5 temples.
Quando eu estava em Los Angeles, eu fui ocupado pelas autoridades para pintar as pinturas do Parampara. Tinham vários templos na costa oriental e eu pintei as pinturas do Parampara para esses templos.
So one day, Karandar, he was GBC.
Dia Karandara, que era o GBC,
he said, I think you should go to, at that time they were still in Boston. Maybe he said Boston. They were just moving to Brooklyn from Boston.
Naquela época tinham devotos se mudando, a impressora da ISKCON, a gráfica da ISKCON estava mudando de Boston para Nova York.
In fact, they moved, but one lady came, Devahuti. She was an older lady in her 40s, much older than anybody. And she was painting. She had some paintings in LA Temple, in Prabhupada's quarters and in the temple. Very nice paintings.
Tinha uma devota chamada Devahuti, ela tinha uns 40 anos, era muito mais velha do que todos nós, e ela tinha umas pinturas nos aposentos de Prabhupada.
So she couldn't get along. Although I read later several letters where Prabhupada had told the other artists to give her special attention because she's a little older and she does her.
Embora, I read this.
Yeah.
Embora Prabhupada havia mandado várias cartas para os devotos para darem atenção e cuidado dessa devota, que ela era um pouco mais velha do que os outros.
But somehow or other she couldn't get along with. They were working in an assembly line, like.
De alguma forma ela não conseguiu se entender com os devotos. Eles estavam trabalhando numa linha tipo linha de fabricação de automóvel.
Right, you said that assembly line. So she couldn't work with this assembly line.
Ela não pôde trabalhar com um grupo assim.
So she told me she didn't like it, and she left. She came back to L.A. I think she went to San Francisco.
E ela voltou para Los Angeles, depois foi para São Francisco.
But I felt that I was
Eu pensei que
I was a real neophyte at this type of painting. Therefore,
eu era muito noviço nesse tipo de pintura.
So I still looked forward to going to New York, and I didn't.
Eu ainda queria ir para Nova York.
It didn't discourage me.
Isso não me desencorajou.
So when I came the first night, it's interesting because I came late. I had many interesting things.
New York.
Yeah, I arrived
at Brooklyn. Eu cheguei em Nova York, no Brooklyn. Eu cheguei tarde.
And the first people I could see was Bhardraj and Murlidhar. They were up late
Os
at night.
primeiros que eu encontrei foram Bhardraj
and Murlidhar.
E Murlidhar, que eram ambos artistas pintores.
They were the chief painters.
Eles eram os principais pintores da ISKCON na época.
At that time, besides Jadurani,
Naquela época, além de Jadurani,
and then Parikshit had just recently came.
E Parikshit tinha vindo recentemente.
So then after that I was painting, and Prabhupada came there in something like May or June. I came to New York in say March, April, I forget, February, early.
Eu cheguei em Nova York no começo do ano de 71.
And a couple of months later, Prabhupada came.
E uns 2 meses depois, Prabhupada chegou.
He gave big initiation every day for 1 week.
Ele deu grandes iniciações todos os dias por uma semana inteira.
Many people were getting initiated.
Muitas pessoas foram iniciadas.
Many people who still live in Alachua even.
Muitas devotos que ainda vivem aqui em Alachua.
You can think of, well, they may be not here now, but you know, Pancharatna and Kirtiraj and Kirtiraj's wife,
a esposa de Kirtiraj,
and so many others.
E tantos outros.
And Trivikram Maharaj took sannyas also.
Trivikram Maharaj tomou sannyas.
So when Prabhupada gave me my name,
quando Prabhupada me deu o meu nome,
he said, "Your name is Pushkar."
O seu nome é Pushkar.
And Pushkar is a famous lake in India.
Pushkar é lago famoso na Índia.
And in fact, later I understood this in the Shastra, the Pushkar, in the Bhagavatam, it says, Saransi Pushkaradini, that this is the main sacred holy lake in northern India.
E depois eu encontrei no Bhagavatam que fala que Pushkar é lago sagrado no norte da Índia.
And he told me you should
Prabhupada disse
you should bring people to this lake.
Que você deve trazer pessoas para esse lago.
Because anyone who bathes in this lake becomes devotee.
Porque qualquer que se banha nesse lago se torna devoto.
So I went one time there in 1974.
Eu fui nesse lugar uma vez em 1974.
And there were some sadhus, but also only I saw one guy visiting, and his mother was bathing in the lake.
E eu encontrei alguns sadhus, mas eu vi uma pessoa visitando e a sua mãe estava se banhando no lago.
But the guy himself refused to go in.
Mas o rapaz, ele recusou a se banhar.
So I thought, well, he's obviously a demon. He won't even swim in the sacred lake.
Quando eu o vi, eu pensei, ele realmente deve ser demônio que nem mesmo quer se banhar nesse lago sagrado.
Yes. Anyway, in 74, well, before 70, yeah, in 74, no, in 71. We're talking 71. So that was 74. I skipped ahead. But there were 3 or 4 times that we got to see Prabhupada very intimately in the Brooklyn Temple.
Durante essa época, 71, houve 3 ou 4 vezes aonde eu pude encontrar com Prabhupada intimamente.
Now,
no Brooklyn.
Yes. So the first time Prabhupada came, before I got about the same week I got initiated, he came to the press.
A primeira vez, na mesma semana em que eu fui iniciado, Srila Prabhupada veio para a editora.
And he brought his 2 or 3, 4 men with him, and he was going came to the art department.
Ele veio com 3 outros devotos, ele estava visitando o departamento de arte da ISKCON.
And so I remember Muralidhar was working on one painting with many incarnations you could see in Bhagavad Gita.
Muralidhar estava trabalhando numa pintura com muitas encarnações. Você pode ver essa pintura no Bhagavad Gita.
And he asked him several questions.
E Muralidhar fez várias perguntas para
Prabhupada
Srila
asked
Prabhupada. Prabhupada perguntou várias perguntas para Muralidhar.
I think he mostly asked him how long it took him to do it.
A pergunta principal foi quanto tempo demorou para você fazer essa pintura?
So another thing is I had done one painting of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta,
Eu tinha feito uma pintura de Srila Bhaktisiddhanta
which was hanging just above Prabhupada's Vyasasana
que estava pendurada acima da Vyasasana de Prabhupada,
in Prabhupada's room.
no quarto de Prabhupada.
And I did another painting hanging on the main Vyasasana in temple room.
E eu fiz outra pintura que estava atrás da Vyasasana de Prabhupada no templo, na sala do templo.
And so anyway, that painting is still, the Bhaktisiddhanta is still in New York, Brooklyn Temple. and
Aquele
different temple.
Bhaktisiddhanta ainda está em Nova York, no templo.
Another time,
Em outra ocasião,
another occasion, I believe 72 or 3,
eu creio que 72 ou 73.
I think 72. Prabhupada
Acho que
invited,
72.
he invited art department and several other BBT people.
Ele convidou os devotos do departamento de arte e também vários outros devotos da BBT
To come to his room, but he actually said almost nothing, but he had a reel-to-reel tape and they were playing something Prabhupada had just recorded.
Ele não disse muito, mas eles estavam tocando uma fita que Prabhupada havia gravado recentemente.
And that he was singing the Jai Radhe Jai Krishna.
Prabhupada estava cantando a música Jai Radhe Jai Krishna.
Yeah, like that. So Harikesh had recorded it, and he told Harikesh told me that he said that when you have Mangalarti, it's not restricted to only Samsara prayer, but you could chant Jai Radhe Jai Krishna or many, many things.
E Harikesh disse para Pushkar que Prabhupada disse para Harikesh que o Mongolarte que não é restrito somente a se cantar Sansara Davanala, mas você também pode cantar Jai Radhe Jai Krishna e muitas outras coisas.
And we know later chant, even in New York now, they chant Vibhavari Shesha, etc.
E até mesmo agora em Nova York eles cantam Vibhavari Shesha.
Right. So one time I was with Rupanuga, so I know it must have been. In any case, what happened, probably in 73, he invited a whole art department and a couple of BBT people to come in his room also.
Também em 73, Srila Prabhupada convidou o departamento de arte inteiro, os devotos daquele departamento e alguns devotos do BBT para encontrarem com ele no seu quarto.
He wanted certain people to go to India and do artwork.
Ele queria que alguns devotos fossem para a Índia para fazer trabalho de artes.
So he mentioned several times how his Guru Maharaj had put on diorama exhibits.
Ele mencionou várias vezes como seu Guru Maharaj havia feito exposições de dioramas.
Right, but we didn't know anything about fate, and he didn't use the word diorama, he just said dolls.
E nós não sabíamos nada desses dioramas, ele usou simplesmente a palavra bonecos.
And we kept looking at each other, what is dolls? We didn't
E nós ficamos olhando um para o outro, que são esses bonecos e bonecas, a gente não entendia o que ele queria
He
dizer.
didn't say sculpture, he said dolls.
Ele não disse esculturas, ele disse bonecos.
So that finally it was established that Bhardraj and one other man were going to go. They volunteered to go.
Dois devotos se ofereceram para ir, Bharadraj e um outro devoto.
The other guy's name is...
E quem não sabe, Bharadraj é o pai de Gauravani, o cantor.
Other fellow was never initiated, but he was a good artist.
E o outro devoto que foi, ele nunca foi iniciado, mas ele era um bom artista.
Anyway, so Bhardraj went, but then he was asking for more volunteers.
E então Prabhupada estava pedindo mais voluntários para irem à Índia.
And Prabhupada, at that time, I don't want to get into history of Bali Mardan, was sitting to Prabhupada's left side.
Naquela época, Bali Mardam estava sentado do lado esquerdo de Prabhupada.
So somebody asked Prabhupada, how much should we bring art supply?
Alguém perguntou para Srila Prabhupada, o senhor acha que nós devemos levar produtos de arte?
So Prabhupada said, if necessary, bring 1 ton of art supply.
Se necessário, tragam com vocês ou levem com vocês 1 tonelada de artigos de arte.
Then he looked at the Bali Madhan and he said, you should wire Jai Pataka. Business means immediately. He looked to his side. He said, business. I always remember he said, business means immediately.
Ele disse para Bali Mardam, você, you should wire some money.
Ask him what they should bring, what they should do.
Okay.
Like a telegram.
A telegram. Ele disse para Bali Mardam que você imediatamente deve contatar Jayapataka Swami por telegrama e perguntar o que eles devem trazer. Negócio significa que tem que se fazer imediatamente.
Though this is an interesting aphorism for those who do business or do anything.
Essa é uma instrução importante para aqueles que fazem negócio ou qualquer coisa, coisa tem que ser feita imediatamente.
But all the time, Bali Madhan had no intention. He never wanted anyone to leave his temple, and he tried to stop us in every conceivable way.
Mas Bali Mardam não queria que ninguém deixasse o seu templo e ele tentou evitar que fôssemos para a Índia de todas as maneiras.
In fact, Bardraj wrote me 5 letters and asking me when I was coming, and I never got any letter because Bali Madhan kept the letters.
Aconteceu que Bharadwaj, depois que chegou na Índia, escreveu 5 cartas para mim, perguntando quando eu iria para a Índia, e eu nunca recebi nenhuma das cartas porque Bali Mardam confiscou as cartas.
And he even told me, Bali Madhan, he said, Prabhupada doesn't know the situation. He said, you can't go. He said that. He said, Prabhupada doesn't know the situation. I thought, this guy is doomed, you know.
Inclusive, Bali Mardam disse para ele que Prabhupada não entende a situação, você não pode ir para a Índia. E ele pensou, essa pessoa não sabe o que ele está falando.
So some months later, it was still
Alguns meses depois,
Prabhupada came back, still 1973.
Ainda em 1973, Prabhupada voltou.
So at that time,
de Nova York,
somehow or other, Rupanuga was there because Prabhupada was there. So
e de alguma forma, Rupanuga estava lá.
No, he wasn't there. It's another pastime I won't talk about.
Não foi esse passatempo.
This time, I was with Bali Mardhan asked me if I had any painting, because I used to paint in the building. I no longer painted at the press because I didn't get along with all the other artists. So I painted in the building. So he asked me for painting.
Okay. Bali Mardhan me pediu uma pintura, eu já estava pintando separadamente, eu não estava me entendendo com os outros artistas, então eu comecei a pintar separadamente, e Bali Mardhan veio e me pediu por uma pintura.
Because he wanted some reason to see Prabhupada, I think.
Porque ele queria ver Prabhupada e trazer uma pintura consigo.
So I gave him one Bhaktisiddhanta painting with his hand in a bead bag, but I said, well, the finger's not finished.
Eu dei uma pintura para ele que tinha Srila Bhaktisiddhanta com a mão no seu saquinho de japa, mas o dedo dele, que fica do lado de fora, não estava terminado.
So he came and he said, Prabhupada wanted to see me now because of the painting.
Ele levou a pintura para Prabhupada e Prabhupada disse que ele queria falar com Pushkar por causa da pintura.
I was thinking he wanted to, tell me it's not finished.
Eu pensei que Prabhupada ia me dizer que essa pintura está faltando o dedo, não está terminada.
And I said, what about the finger? And Bali Madhan said, I didn't show him the finger, which is weird thing, funny. Anyway, aside from that, so when I went to see Prabhupada, he was putting tilak on like this.
Quando eu cheguei para ver Prabhupada, ele estava colocando tilaka.
And he was looking in the mirror.
Ele estava olhando no espelho.
And when I came in, paid obeisances, he was looking at me through the mirror.
Quando eu cheguei e ofereci reverências, ele estava olhando para mim pelo espelho.
And he said, so you can go to India for some days?
Então você pode ir para a Índia por algum tempo?
Some days, which to me, he hadn't forgotten anything from last time that I wanted to go.
Se Prabhupada não havia esquecido nada da última vez que eu queria, ele não se esqueceu.
Although I finally I had gotten one letter because Bardraj wrote to Gopal Krishna, who was practically the only householder who lived outside across the street. So I got that letter, and I could understand that Bali Madhan was trying to stop me.
So Bharadwaj wrote to Gopal Krishna.
Yeah, after writing 4 letters, he said, what happened to all the letters?
Finalmente, Pushkar recebeu uma carta de Bharadwaj, porque Bharadwaj mandou a carta não para o presidente do templo, mas para Gopal Krishna, que morava fora do outro lado da rua, e Gopal Krishna entregou a carta para Pushkar.
So then I figured Bali Madhan didn't want me to go, but I made big insult to his wife, there's a long famous story, but I told her she was a prostitute, so then he wanted me to go and stay in India.
Então ele causou um grande insulto para a esposa de Bali Mardhan, disse que ela era uma prostituta. Aí Balimardan se enfesou com ele e mandou ele para a Índia.
And I went to India with Bali Mardan and two other guys, famous Jai Sachinandan, who was like his servant.
Balimardan also went.
He went, first time.
E pela primeira vez
No, for me, first time, not for him. He knew everything about India.
Ok. Então ele foi para a Índia com Balimardan e Jaya Satinandan.
And one other guy, one other
mais
guy,
uma outra pessoa.
Satyajit. He used to slap those guys, but he didn't slap me because I would slap him back. But he was a heavy guy. I don't know if you want to say all that. But anyway, so in India then, I was painting the doors. There was one other English devotee, big tall guy, and we were painting doors all around the second floor of the Lotus building.
E na Índia, eu e mais um devoto inglês alto estávamos pintando as portas do segundo andar do edifício Lotus, que ainda está lá.
And at one time Prabhupada came around the building chanting japa.
E um dia Prabhupada estava caminhando pelo edifício cantando japa.
And nobody was there.
E ninguém estava lá.
And I was standing up on a box or something, or a chair, and I was painting
Eu
one door.
estava em cima de uma cadeira pintando.
And I was painting one copy from Krishna book with Krishna Balaram jumping off a mountain or something.
Eu estava pintando uma pintura do livro de Krishna com Krishna e Balaram pulando de uma montanha.
These pictures are still there, but because we never varnished them, or they're very worn out. But finally I varnished them about 15, 20 years ago. But they're there. They keep them. There's some of them there.
A pintura ainda está lá. Estava se desintegrando, mas há uns 15 anos atrás eu fui lá e dei um acabamento, ainda está lá.
Anyway, Prabhupada asked me at the time, he was just walking
Prabhupada estava passando por ali, naquela época ele perguntou para mim.
He was in a very relaxed mood,
Ele
always
estava bem assim, à vontade.
in Mayapur, always very relaxed, very
Mayapur ele
relaxed.
sempre me dava vontade.
And so he said, "Oh, how long this has taken you?"
Quanto tempo está demorando para você pintar isto?
I said, "Prabhupada, I'm so slow, I think it may have taken a week."
Prabhupada, eu sou tão devagar, eu acho que deve ter demorado uma semana.
So he said, then
Ele
he said,
disse.
he said, slowly but surely.
Ele falou devagar, mas com certeza.
And then he just kept walking,
E ele continuou andando
around the building, but he
em
wasn't,
volta do edifício,
he was chanting japa.
cantando japa.
Nobody was there.
Ninguém estava lá.
At one time, in 74 or 5, I was sitting by the steps, and I was
Em Mayapur.
in Mayapur, and I was
E em 73, 74, eu estava sentado na escadaria.
74, definitely.
74, definitivamente.
And so those days we ate very, very austere.
Naqueles dias nós comíamos de uma maneira muito austera.
Like we ate this flat rice. Later, it was like 1 rupee a kilo. Very cheap rice. It was animal rice, but
Nós comíamos esse arroz amassado que era 1 rúpia o quilograma. Era
was
um arroz que eles davam para animais.
so Prabhupada came and
Prabhupada veio
up near the steps of the lotus, and
perto ali onde eu estava sentado naqueles degraus.
he said to me, he
Ele
said,
disse para mim:
it was just plain rice with a little salt,
só tinha esse arroz e um pouco de sal.
and sometimes maybe yogurt. But Prabhupada
Às
asked me,
vezes talvez um pouco de iogurte.
Prabhupada said, "This is your breakfast,"
E Prabhupada perguntou: esse é seu de jejum?
and I just kind of said, I shrugged my shoulders. I couldn't. I said,
Eu
yeah.
balancei assim meus ombros dizendo: é isso aí.
He didn't. I mean, I don't know if he was pleased or not pleased, but I can't say. But
Eu não sei se Prabhupada estava satisfeito ou não satisfeito, não
But-
posso dizer. Mas
you can consider one thing.
você pode considerar uma coisa.
Because I used to, I was trained in New York to be very, New York sneaky. I was sneaky. I used to come from the very beginning when I got to Mayapur. I would always go near Prabhupada's door, near the window, and always kind of listen to what's going on.
Vindo de Nova York, eu era assim, como
So,
malandro, street smart, malandro de rua. E eu costumava ir no quarto de Prabhupada e colocar o ouvido lá na janela e ficar ouvindo.
what happened? So I
O que
noticed
aconteceu?
one time they brought Prabhupada big maha plate.
Eles trouxeram grande prato de marra para Prabhupada.
So he took a few bites here and
Ele
there.
comeu um pouquinho de cada coisa.
And then he said, "So everyone is eating like this?"
Então ele perguntou: então está todo mundo comendo dessa maneira?
And then the leaders were there, but they couldn't say anything.
Os líderes estavam ali, mas ninguém falou nada.
Because we were mostly eating this.
Porque a maioria de nós estávamos comendo esse arroz.
What could they say?
O que eles podiam dizer?
So anyway, I was thinking in Mayapur
Em Mayapur,
also, it was a very, very peaceful. One time I
Era muito tranquilo.
I came to Prabhupada's door. At that time, the doors used to slam.
Eu cheguei no quarto de Prabhupada. Naquela época, as portas batiam.
For some reason, they didn't figure out to put the little wooden stops at that time.
Eles não tinham parador de porta que não parava a porta de bater, fechar com vento e bater.
So Prabhupada liked the breeze, but at the same time, he didn't want the door slamming. He called it a heart cracking sound.
Prabhupada gostava da brisa, mas ao mesmo tempo ele não gostava de portas batendo. Ele dizia que era aquele som quebrava o coração, era som quebrador de coração.
So as I was listening, just as I got to the opposite window on the back side of the room, Prabhupada said, "Just see, he has become Brahman, and he cannot even close the door." He said about one sannyasi.
E Pushkar estava do outro lado do quarto e entrou um sannyasi, mas o sannyasi não fechou a porta e Prabhupada disse, vejam só, ele se tornou um brahmana, mas ele nem mesmo pode fechar a porta.
The way I started to get the idea to listen to Prabhupada, it started like this. It started this way. I was a lazy guy. I didn't like to go to a big parikram, so I used to just stay back and study the shlokas, even when I first came.
No começo, na Índia, eu não gostava de ir nos parikramas, eu só ficava no templo e ficava estudando os versos, os shlokas, decorando os shlokas.
I used to consider that I'm already in Mayapur, and Prabhupada had already said that this place was the most holy place, more even than the birthplace.
Eu já estou em Mayapur e Prabhupada disse que esse lugar é o lugar mais sagrado, eu já estou aqui.
He may have said it afterwards, but the main thing was, he came one day upstairs, and I was the only person awake. I was studying.
E um dia ele veio no andar de cima, eu era a única pessoa acordada e eu estava estudando.
But most of the people had gone for parikram.
Mas quase todo mundo havia saído para o parikrama.
And in those days, I don't think they did 9-day, I forget. But anyway.
Eu não acho que eles faziam 9 dias de parikramas naquela época.
But they were all gone, and except
mas todo mundo tinha ido.
Many people were sick. There were people from Europe, guys from Europe, Australia, America. They were lying. There must have been about 40, 50 guys sick, sleeping, and they didn't even know Prabhupada was walking around.
Tinha muitos devotos da Austrália, dos Estados Unidos e de outros lugares. Aproximadamente uns 40, estavam todos doentes e deitados. Eles não sabiam que Prabhupada estava andando pelo ashram.
It looked like a battlefield scene with a bunch of guys dead and Prabhupada walking around all these bodies. Parecia um campo de
batalha com muita gente morta no chão e Prabhupada caminhando pelos corpos.
And I was the only one awake except for Prabhupada's one or two.
Eu era o único acordado estudando versos ali.
Except Shuta Kirti and somebody was walking with Prabhupada.
E Shuta Kirti e mais algum devoto estavam caminhando com Prabhupada.
This was in the room above the floor above Prabhupada's floor, in those days.
E isso aconteceu no andar acima do andar de Prabhupada.
When they first built the building, the rooms were twice as big. Then they cut them. These rooms were big.
Quando eles primeiro construíram aqueles edifícios, os quartos eram muito maiores. Depois eles dividiram os quartos.
So after that, I got the idea that.
Depois disso, eu entendi.
I got the idea that Prabhupada is going to be very angry.
Prabhupada vai ficar muito irado.
And that I should go down and sneak around and listen to what he's going to tell the leaders about this. It was so.
Porque eu pensei, ele vai ficar irado agora com isso, então eu quero descer e ouvir o que ele vai falar para os líderes sobre isso.
I mean, you have to imagine there's 40, 50 guys stretched out, and none of them paid attention. They're all so sick and sleeping that.
Imagina que tem 40 devotos lá deitados e Prabhupada chega e eles estão tão doentes, deitados, que eles nem ofereceram reverências.
And it was already light out. It must have been 7:30, at least 7:30.
Devia ser 7 ou 7:30 da noite.
And here there's, so I got the idea to come down and listen.
Então eu pensei, deixa eu descer, eu quero ouvir o que Srila Prabhupada vai falar para os líderes sobre isso.
So what happened? Sure enough, that exactly happened. And
então, certamente isso foi o que aconteceu.
It's still time?
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. So what happened is, when I came down to see, Prabhupada was sure enough not chastising, but he was not very pleased in asking, the leaders, anyone knows the history, there's Bhavananda Jayapataka, Gargamuni, and Tamal Krishna. Those were the leaders.
Os líderes eram Bhavananda Jayapataka, Tamal Krishna e Gargamuni.
Yeah, they were the leaders.
Eles eram os líderes daquela época em Mayapur.
So Jayapataka and Bhavananda were more or less saying they didn't have enough money to have better food, and therefore the people were sick.
Jayapataka e Bhavananda estavam dizendo que nós não temos dinheiro para oferecer a eles melhor alimentação e por isso que eles estão doentes.
And it seemed like they were also trying to blame Tamal Krishna. He was GBC of the whole India.
Parecia também que eles estavam querendo passar a culpa para Tamal Krishna, que era o GBC da Índia inteira.
That he didn't help them enough or something. But
Que ele não havia ajudado muito.
Prabhupada wasn't accepting these arguments at all.
Mas Prabhupada não estava aceitando nenhum desses argumentos.
He said that if they were real managers, they would engage people, and if they worked hard, they could digest stones.
Prabhupada disse que se eles fossem administradores genuínos, eles ocupariam as pessoas adequadamente, eles estariam tão energéticos que poderiam digerir pedras.
Now, at the same time, sitting behind them, and I think they didn't know it, was one ex-sannyasi, who was a sannyasi named Sudama Vipra.
Eles não notaram, mas sentado atrás deles havia sannyasi chamado Sudama Vipra, ex-sannyasi.
He was a bodyguard. He was a very tough guy. He was the bodyguard of Sai, my old ex-guru, Siddha Swarup.
Ele era uma pessoa muito forte e ele era o ex-guarda-costa do meu amigo Siddha Swarupa.
Yeah, they used to wear leather jacket, even though they were sannyasis. And I don't remember if Siddha Swarup was there at that time. He might have been, but the interaction that I'm thinking of had to do with this Sudama Vipra.
Eu não sei se Siddha Swarupa estava lá na hora, mas Sudama Vipra estava lá e eles usavam umas jaquetas de couro.
Now you have to understand that Sudama Vipra was very, very heavy guy. He had written letters to GBCs that if they came to the Philippines where he was in charge, he would I don't know, he said kill or turn them into compost, something. He scared them that nobody went there.
Esse Sudama Vipra era uma pessoa muito barra pesada. E ele estava pregando nas Filipinas,
Yeah.
nas Filipinas, e ele escreveu carta para outros GBCs que não venham aqui. Se vocês virem aqui, eu vou torná-los em composto.
Anywhere in Philippines, don't set foot there.
Ele disse que em nenhum lugar na Filipina vocês não venham aqui, que vocês vão virar composto, e ninguém ia.
I knew this.
E eu sabia disso.
So I knew his nature. It's actually
Eu conhecia a natureza dele.
Krishna arranged the greatest entertainment for me because I don't think it would have had the same effect with most people. But what happened, I'll tell you.
Krishna arranjou para mim o melhor entretenimento. Eu não creio que isso aconteceria com outras pessoas.
Now,
vou explicar agora.
Next to Sudama Vipra was sitting a guy named Chaku.
E do lado de Sudama Vipra estava sentado uma outra pessoa chamada Chaku.
Chaku was a Muslim.
Chaku era muçulmano.
But he loved Prabhupada. He used to come and
Mas
listen.
ele adorava Prabhupada. Ele vinha ver
He
Prabhupada.
had Muslim beard like this with no mustache.
Ele tinha aquele tipo de barba muçulmana e sem bigode.
And he was head of the other workers.
E ele era o chefe dos outros trabalhadores.
If you asked him in Bengali, are you good, Balo? And he would say, Bhagavan Sab Jani, means Krishna knows everything. Bhagavan, he would call him, and he used to love to hear Prabhupada talk.
E se você perguntava para ele, você está bem? Ele falava em Bengali que Krishna Bhagavan sabe de tudo.
So now,
E ele gostava de ouvir Srila Prabhupada falar.
so while these complaining they didn't have money for food, at one point Prabhupada,
Enquanto então eles estavam reclamando que eles não tinham dinheiro, os líderes reclamando que não tinham dinheiro para comprar comida, melhor alimento para os devotos.
now I don't know, the effect can't be the same, but I'll tell that Prabhupada was so amazingly brilliant.
Mas Prabhupada se mostrou tão fascinantemente brilhante.
He said,
Ele disse,
he said, you need money, Sudama Vipra will supply.
Ele disse, vocês precisam de dinheiro, Sudama Vipra vai suprir o dinheiro.
And they turned around. I don't know if they didn't know he was there, and they looked at Prabhupada because they all knew that if they even came to his place, he'd kill them. So he was the last person in his kind who would give them one paisa.
E eles sabiam, todo mundo tinha medo de Sudama Vipra, eles sabiam se eles fossem para o lugar de Sudama Vipra, eles viravam composto. Então, Sudama Vipra seria a última pessoa na ISKCON que daria qualquer dinheiro para eles.
So just as Prabhupada said it, they turned around and exactly Sudama Vipra took his watch off, which I think might have been expensive, and he gave to Chaku.
E naquele mesmo momento eles viram e veem Sudama Vipra ali. E Sudama Vipra tirou o seu relógio, que parecia ser um relógio caro, e deu para Chaco.
He was trying to, it looked to me like he was showing off that he was, yes, very generous. He gave Chaku his watch.
Ele parece que ele queria mostrar que ele era muito generoso e deu o relógio para Chaco.
And so I think everyone who saw that was completely amazed and flabbergasted. Because Prabhupada's wit, I mean, he said this guy is not going to give them anything, you know. And so Prabhupada is pointing to him that you are a rascal also, you know. Because he knew his mentality.
E Prabhupada estava mostrando que Sudama Vipra was rascal.
Yeah.
Que Sudama Vipra também era patife,
Prabhupada
porque ele entendia sua
said,
mentalidade.
Prabhupada said he was a rascal. Later he said he was a gunda.
Prabhupada disse que ele era patife. Mais tarde Prabhupada disse que ele era gunda. What is gunda?
Gunda is, you know, beat you, kill you, like thug.
Gunda, pessoas na Índia que vão bater em você e matar você.
Yeah, he's a gangster, you know, like this.
Gangster.
So because other things happen, I won't talk. But the point was that Prabhupada's wit and his just boom, the way he took hold of that situation, just to give lesson.
Podemos ver como Prabhupada podia usar uma situação assim somente para ensinar os devotos.
Another time in Mayapur.
Em outra ocasião em Mayapur.
In 1977.
1977.
Does it matter if I use names? No.
No, it's okay.
Because anyway, they don't mind. Yeah, but there's a kind of a story behind it. But
tem uma história por trás disso.
And when we were printing the Back to God in Los Angeles,
quando nós estávamos imprimindo a revista De Volta ao Supremo em Los Angeles,
Parikshit was doing one picture of a scientist. You can see a scientist is pouring a test tube into one beaker, you know.
Parikshit estava pintando uma pintura de cientista colocando o ingrediente dentro de uma vasilha química.
And it looks like a scientist. There's trees. There's something. It looks like he's creating life in the test tube.
E tem árvores e tudo dentro daquele tubo de teste. Parecia que ele estava criando a vida dentro daquele tubo de teste.
So I told Parikshit, I said, this should be Krishna's hand, not the scientist.
Eu disse para Parikshit, isso deve ser a mão de Krishna, não a mão do cientista.
And he said, well, this is the way Rameshwar wants it.
Essa é a maneira que Rameshwar quer.
So later on, you speed up about, you speed up a few months.
Alguns meses mais tarde.
So, and in fact, when the magazine came out,
e quando a revista saiu,
Rameshwar told me that was the best illustration that they ever did it for BTG.
Rameshwar disse que essa foi a melhor ilustração que já foi feita para a revista De Volta ao Supremo.
And I told him the same thing. I said, no.
Eu disse para ele a mesma coisa.
I said, it's bogus. It should be Krishna's hand.
Isso é bogus, deve ser a mão de Krishna.
So me and him always had a very funny relationship. So
eu e Rameshwar sempre tínhamos uma relação pouco
estranha.
Ele não gostava de me ouvir.
Anyway, the point is, a few months later,
mas alguns meses mais tarde,
Rameshwar came late to the festival in 77.
Rameshwar veio tarde para o festival de 77.
As soon as he got
in Mayapur?
Yeah.
Em Mayapur.
So as soon as he came out of this car, the first person he saw was me. I was getting
quando ele saiu do carro, a primeira pessoa que ele viu foi eu.
And he said,
e ele disse,
he said, Pushkar, what are they saying about me? Because he thought the
Pushkar, o que eles estão dizendo sobre mim?
The leaders were talking about him. He heard the leaders were talking
Ele ouviu
about
dizer que os líderes estavam falando alguma coisa.
So I immediately told him they're going
Imediatamente eu disse para
I said they're going to kick you off BTG. Prabhupada doesn't like your mood.
Eles vão tirá-lo da BBT. Prabhupada não gosta da sua maneira.
Okay, so he walked up. He didn't think that he just got like that.
Não, ele simplesmente fez assim e foi embora.
So he went off to the Lotus building.
E foi para o edifício Lotus.
So I ran up after.
Eu corri atrás dele.
When Prabhupada was getting a massage.
Prabhupada estava sendo massageado.
Behind his room on the balcony.
Atrás do seu quarto na varanda.
And his head was down.
E a sua cabeça estava para baixo.
And Jayadvaita and me and Pradumna were in one room.
Jayadvaita, eu e Pradyumna estávamos num
We
quarto.
were listening what Prabhupada is telling
E
Rameshwar.
nós estávamos ouvindo o que Prabhupada estava falando para Rameshwara.
So he was holding that very magazine. He's saying, why this?
E
No.
Prabhupada estava segurando aquela mesma
He
revista
said,
de Volta
and it
Suprema.
wasn't just the illustration, but the last few issues, they were using karmi names and giving. Prabhupada didn't like this mood of the.
Não era só a ilustração, mas nas últimas edições ele estava usando o nome em vez do nome de devoto, usando o nome de Carmes na revista.
So he said, why there's not so many pictures? So Rameshwar said, well, Prabhupada, I didn't know anything about this. You know, I mean, he knew that Rameshwar was in charge.
Prabhupada disse, por que não tem tantas pinturas nessa revista? E Rameshwara disse, Prabhupada, não tem nada a ver com isso. Mas Prabhupada sabia que Rameshwara era encarregado.
So basically he was lying to Prabhupada, right in front to him.
Não, ele na verdade estava mentindo para Prabhupada, na frente de Prabhupada.
It's not really lying because Prabhupada knew this guy's a controller, you know, he's
Não
a
é
big,
mesmo,
big
nem
manager.
mesmo
Of course he
mentindo, porque
knows.
Prabhupada sabia que ele era o controlador do
It's
programa, certamente ele
It
sabia.
was silly to think he could fool Prabhupada. You know, we were like shocked that he would say that.
Nós estávamos chocados como ele podia dizer isso para o Prabhupada, como tentando enganar Prabhupada.
So then Prabhupada said,
Então
that's all.
Prabhupada disse,
He said, that's all right. I will send Satsvarup and he will bring back the old-fashioned Krishna consciousness.
está bem, eu vou mandar Satsvarupa e ele vai trazer de volta o antigo estilo de consciência de Krishna.
And then Rameshwar says, but Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was getting, he had his head down.
Mas Rameshwar disse, mas Prabhupada.
In other words, he was so attached to being in charge of
Ele
that.
estava tão apegado a ser encarregado daquele programa.
And Prabhupada didn't even look at him. He said,
Prabhupada nem mesmo olhou para ele.
he just said, you talk to GBC, that's all.
Prabhupada disse, você fala com o GBC. Isso é
And
tudo.
he said that, and then that was the end, and Rameshwar was
E aí
taken out.
esse era o final.
So that's the way Prabhupada operated. He wasn't sentimental.
Prabhupada não era sentimental.
He was trying to make so many excuses.
O Rameshwar estava querendo dar tantas desculpas. Mas
And that,
Prabhupada não era
reminded
sentimental.
me of something that happened in 1972 when I was with Rupanuga in the Brooklyn Temple.
You know, I wanted to ask you, because you were there at the Brooklyn Temple when Bali Mardam had all that issue. Can you tell us that past time?
Well, I left, okay.
Eu estou perguntando para Pushkar contar. Teve incidente com Bali Mardam muito instrutivo no templo de Nova York, when Prabhupada said that you should surrender everything but your intelligence.
Yes.
So eu pedi para ele descrever passatempo muito instrutivo.
It's a long story,
É uma história longa.
but I'll tell you this, because I was there and again listening when the whole thing ended.
Eu estava lá novamente ouvindo quando tudo terminou.
Yeah, because it went on all the way up to October something, near the end of 74, but the whole time I was
Isso
in India.
aconteceu até o final de 74, mas na maior parte do tempo eu estava na Índia.
And it was getting worse and worse, but I
E
wasn't
estava
there.
ficando pior e pior.
But I was not there that whole
Mas eu
time.
não estava lá durante todo esse tempo. And Bali Mardam, who was Bali Mardam at that time?
Bali
What was his
Mardam,
position?
he took
Quem era Bali Mardam
Bali
naquela
Mardam
época?
was a very, very big person and one of the two most important people in United States.
Bali Mardam era
American management.
dos dois líderes mais importantes nos Estados Unidos.
There was only Karandar and him, and there was
Havia
other leaders.
Karandara e ele, haviam outros líderes.
They were the two most big leaders, Karandar and Bali Mardam.
Eles eram ele era dos dois grandes líderes, era Karandara
And Bali Mardam.
em Los Angeles.
Karandar was in West Coast, yeah.
Na costa ocidental e Bali Mardam na costa
East Coast.
oriental.
Right. So, I can tell you one thing that when
Eu posso dizer uma coisa.
I can say so many things, but one thing is unbelievable thing that
Uma
when
coisa inacreditável.
this lady came and she was old, she was obviously pretty old.
Esta mulher veio e ela era mais velha.
Now, of course, we don't know if she's Japanese or Chinese.
Nós não sabíamos se ela era japonesa ou chinesa.
But Bali Mardam, after she came 2-3 times,
Ela veio duas ou três vezes.
once
Was he a sannyasi at this time? No.
he was still sannyas.
Ele era sannyasi nessa
He
época.
gave up sannyas in 73, but he took in 72 with Hridayananda Rupanuga and
Satsarup.
Satsvarup.
Ele Balimardan tomou sannyasi em 73 com Hridayananda,
Four.
Satsarupa
Rupanuga.
e Rupanuga.
So 4 of them. So
Quatro
anyway,
deles.
so this thing is very amazing that she came. I saw her 2-3 times. So on
Eu
one,
vi esta mulher 2 ou 3 vezes.
so one Sunday,
Num domingo,
Balimadam was still sannyasi.
Balimardan ainda estava vestido de sannyasi.
He asked me.
Ele me perguntou,
It could have been even early 73 or late 72. I'm not sure.
isso foi no final de 72 ou no começo de 73?
He said, how many books did you do with Sunday Feast? How many
Ele
books did I
perguntou-
sell?
During the Sunday feast?
Yeah, after the Sunday Feast, he asked me, Pushkar, he's a very interesting fellow, you know, a very deep, commanding voice, like, hey, Pushkar, how many books did you sell? Like that, you know.
Ele perguntou, depois da festa de domingo, ele perguntou para o Pushkar, Pushkar, quantos livros você vendeu na festa de domingo?
So I wasn't a big book distributor. I was
Eu
a
não era
pen-
grande distribuidor de livros.
But considering I sold 5 first cantos, 1 volume. Just the first canto, first volume.
Eu vendi 5 livros do primeiro volume do primeiro canto
To different guests.
para vários convidados.
So
na
I
festa de
thought
domingo.
that was a respectable thing to
Eu
do.
pensei que isso era uma quantia respeitável.
And I got an average $5 each.
E eu recebi $5 em média de cada pessoa.
So I got $25.
Eu recebi $25.
So he held up. He had either $200 or $300, and he said,
Ele
got-
tinha
in his
200
hand.
ou $300 na sua mão.
And he said to me, he
Ele
said,
disse para mim,
I got $300 from the old lady.
eu recebi $300 daquela senhora.
Particularly said old lady.
Ele particularmente disse daquela velha.
After he got married one day, he
E
told
depois ele se casou, he got married to her.
later, after he got
Mais
married,
tarde, depois que ele se casou com ela,
he was telling me she was 28 years old.
ele estava me dizendo que ela era tinha 28 anos de idade.
Even though we were 26, both me and Bali, I was a month older than him.
Muito embora eu e ele tínhamos 26 anos de idade.
And I said, Bali Mardan,
Você sabe, Bali,
I'm drawing faces,
eu pinto faces
draws since I'm small kid.
desde que eu era menino pequeno.
You're gonna tell me she's below 40 years old.
Você não pode me convencer que ela tem menos de 40.
At that time, she was probably mid 40 at least.
Naquela época ela devia estar lá pelos 45.
But she looked bad because she might have had a stroke.
Mas ela não tinha uma boa aparência, parece que ela tinha tido algum derrame cerebral.
So somehow or other, he either
alguma forma ou
no
outra.
one knows. Okay, so now in '74, when everyone just got completely fed up with them and kicked them out,
Em 74, quando os devotos do templo de Nova York ficaram cansados dele e dessa senhora,
the end of '74.
no final de 74, e expulsaram eles do templo.
Prabhupada was in his room, and I'm again listening.
O padre estava no seu quarto e novamente eu estava lá ouvindo.
And he's speaking 2 or 3 people in his room.
Ele estava falando para duas ou três pessoas no seu quarto.
And it was dark, night.
E estava escuro e era tarde da noite.
Lights were out because there was no power.
As luzes estavam apagadas porque faltou eletricidade.
Only a kerosene lamp.
Somente um lampião de querosene.
So the discussion had been going on. So now
Havia essa discussão, estava acontecendo por
all
algum tempo.
discussions was about this Balimardan incident.
E todas as discussões eram sobre esse incidente com Balimardan.
So what I heard, and I don't remember, but someone said to Prabhupada
Alguém disse para Prabhupada,
that Sudama, not Sudama Vipra, but the sannyasi, the
alguém
other,
disse para
that
Prabhupada Sudama, não o Sudama Vipra,
Sudama-
o outro Sudama sannyasi.
Sudama knew some Japanese because he lived in Japan.
Sudama conhece um pouco de japonês, da língua, porque ele viveu no Japão.
And he said that someone quoted that he wasn't there, but that he had tried to speak with her in Japanese, but she didn't seem to learn. And she was supposed to be the heiress to Toyota.
Ela se apresentava como uma herdeira dos donos da Toyota. E Sudama, que conhecia um pouco de japonês, tentou falar com ela em japonês, mas ela não sabia japonês.
At the same time, Brahmananda said that he had gone to, he was there, I think,
Ao
and
mesmo tempo, Brahmananda, que estava lá,
he had gone to one Toyota dealer, India,
foi numa concessionária da Toyota,
in I think Nairobi, who was
em Nairobi,
and he said, oh, he said, you know that the Toyota daughter is one devotee in ISKCON?
Você sabe que a filha do dono da Toyota é um devoto do Hare Krishna?
So that man said, no, that's not possible because I know Mr. Toyota. He was a dealer, but he knew the man. And he said, I know him very well. He has only some sons. He has no daughter.
Aí o homem da concessionária falou, isso não é possível porque eu conheço o senhor Toyota e ele só tem filhos, ele não tem filhas.
So then there was quiet. There's different things were said because
Então várias coisas estavam
they
acontecendo.
had already kicked out.
Eles
Gopal,
já tinham expulsado Bali Mardana do templo.
that day they had kicked him out. But see, Gopal Krishna came and I think Jai Tirtha, and they had some
Gopal Krishna veio e Jaya Tirtha.
they had tapes of this lady speaking this crazy nonsense.
Eles tinham haviam gravado fitas dessa senhora falando tolices.
She said things like
Ela
that.
disse coisas como
She said things that this. Of course, I wasn't there, but she was saying that she had in the tape they made, for instance, she said
que eles gravaram.
she insisted on being called Maharani for one thing,
Ela insistia em ser chamada Maharani.
and she said that she had quadruplets, and they were the 4 Kumaras, and she was pregnant with the 4 Kumaras.
Que ela ia ter 4 filhos quadrúplos, não sei se em português, e que eles seriam os 4 Kumaras.
Yeah, but somehow, where were they? They may have died. Nobody knows.
Mas onde estavam as crianças? Talvez morreram, ninguém sabia de nada.
She was too old to be pregnant, and
Talvez ela fosse
and
muito
in any case, never
muita idade
looked.
para se engravidar, mas ninguém sabia.
So when Prabhupada heard, and she also said that Bali Mardana was incarnation of Bhaktisiddhanta
Ela
Saraswati.
também disse que Bali Mardana era uma encarnação de Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati.
So Prabhupada, he said, turn it off. I heard enough.
Prabhupada falou, desliga essa fita, já ouvi o suficiente.
So that had all happened already. Now go back. We're
Isso
at
tudo já
night.
havia acontecido. Agora voltando naquela noite.
So this is the nighttime. It's very quiet, and they just
Agora é a noite, está bem, tudo está calmo.
only thing you hear is crickets and frogs.
Você só ouve sapos cantando e grilos.
And Prabhupada, so after they told him about all the evidence,
E Prabhupada, após eles apresentarem toda a evidência para Prabhupada,
and Prabhupada is very quiet, and Prabhupada said,
Prabhupada estava muito quieto e de repente
and
disse,
Prabhupada had a very grave voice. He
e
said,
Prabhupada tinha uma voz muito grave.
He said, it is a great mystery, is it not?
É um grande mistério, não é?
Because Prabhupada said she is his mother's age. Why he is attracted to her?
Não, ela tem a idade da mãe dele, por que ele está atraído a ela?
So I really also, we don't know if Bali Mardana knew about it, if he found out, or no one knows. When I came to India with him that time, he only wanted to stay 3 days because he was hurrying back to be with his wife.
Quando eu fui à Índia com ele, ele só quis ficar por 3 dias porque ele tinha que correr de volta para ficar.
He was only going to stay for the meetings.
And what about what Prabhupada said after all
This
this?
was before. This was early in the year when the 3 days.
When Prabhupada said that you should surrender everything except your intelligence.
Oh, I heard that part of that conversation. That was earlier in the day. And he was telling that the others,
Mais cedo no dia eu ouvi uma conversa.
he said that the others in the Brooklyn Temple were innocent. He said, but the senior people,
Ele
like
falou que Prabhupada disse que as outras pessoas aqui no templo do Brooklyn eram inocentes.
but the senior people, he
Mas
said,
as pessoas os devotos mais
and
antigos.
he said Jayadvaita and
Ele
Jadurani.
mencionou Jayadvaita,
He
Jadurani.
said, why they accepted this?
Por que eles aceitaram isso?
And after I yelled at her that time earlier in the year, or end of 73, then Jadurani saw me later in the day and she said, oh, you made Maharani cry, because I remember that.
Dia Jadurani, antes naquele mesmo ano, me disse, você fez Maharani chorar, por que você fez isso?
The woman was very clever because she manipulated the temple.
Mas essa mulher era muito perita em manipular o templo.
I was several times her bodyguard, and she went to Chinatown in Manhattan, and she bought Chinese food, and she spoke fluent Mandarin, Chinese.
Eu era, às vezes, guarda-costa dela, e ela ia no bairro chinês em Nova York, e ela comprava comida chinesa, e ela falava mandarim, a língua chinesa, fluentemente.
And another time, I was in the office, and she was asking for cash from the safe.
E outro dia eu estava no escritório e ela estava me pedindo para dar a ela dinheiro do cofre.
And Bali Mardana said, don't give her anything.
E Bali Mardana disse, não dê ela
And this was
nada.
way back in the beginning.
Isso lá no começo do
So it
desse
seems
programa.
like he knew something, because
Parece
then
que
I
ele
said,
sabia algo.
Bali Mardana, if she's Toyota, we should have 5-7 Toyotas outside parked.
E eu
Why
disse
she's
para
getting
Bali
money from the
Mardana,
safe?
Bali Mardana, se ela é da família do Toyota, a gente deve ter vários carros da Toyota lá de fora, porque ela está pegando dinheiro do nosso cofre.
And I had not seen my ex-guru Siddha Sarup Sai, and that time he came in 74, I was on the roof talking to him.
E eu não havia visto o meu ex-guru Siddha Swarupa Sai há muito tempo, mas ele chegou em Nova York, eu estava em cima, no topo do prédio, conversando com ele.
On the roof. Anyway, he said he was criticizing everybody.
E Siddha Swarupa estava criticando todo mundo.
And he said how Bali Mardana had come to Hawaii to chastise him.
Ele disse como Bali Mardana ido para o Hawaii para
And he
castigá-lo.
came with some crazy Chinese lady.
E ele veio com uma mulher chinesa maluca.
And that was in the beginning, in February of
fevereiro.
74, before anyone thought she was Chinese, but he knew.
Antes de qualquer pessoa soubesse que ela era
Siddha
chinesa.
Sarup already knew,
Mas
because
Siddha Swarupa já sabia.
from Hawaii, you know so many Oriental people, and
Em Hawaii existem muitas pessoas
there's
orientais.
many Chinese, Japanese, so you
E muitos
know the
chineses,
difference.
japoneses,
He
ele
already
conhece a
knew.
diferença, ele já sabia.
He knew the difference. So anyway, that's a story, long story.
But you didn't say that part. That
No, I
Prabhupada
just
said
said
you
it.
surrender everything. No, you didn't
No,
say
he said that part, but he might have written that in the letter. But I'm saying what I heard.
Okay. But you didn't say,
That's
so
a
I
letter.
didn't translate, because you didn't say I didn't translate.
But is it in the letter, what you just said?
Ravindra said it was in a letter.
Okay.
Some people say, but it's never made to the archives.
I see. But what I'm saying is what I heard. I didn't.
Ah.
Those particular words he may have said, but I'm giving the idea of what he said. And another thing he said, if you want to hear more.
I heard Toshan told me this.
Yeah,
Toshan
Tosan.
was it.
But another thing, Tosan wasn't in Mayapur listening to it like I was, but he said to Brahmananda,
Prabhupada disse para Brahmananda,
he said
ele disse,
that Bali Mardana had presented that
Bali
he was
Mardana
very,
apresentou-
Bali Mardana was very expert, intelligent man, So
Bali Mardana era homem muito esperto e inteligente.
what I remember is this. He got everyone in the whole Brooklyn temple in one room,
Ele levou todo mundo do templo do Brooklyn para uma sala.
and he had just come back and he was wearing white from England.
Ele voltou da Inglaterra e estava vestido de branco.
And he said how this woman was Toyota,
E ele disse como essa mulher era da
and that
família Toyota.
Prabhupada told him to marry her.
E Prabhupada disse para ele se casar com ela.
Now, later on in the year, what I heard he told Brahmananda is that Bali Mardana has made it seem like this, but actually I understood, Prabhupada said, I understood he's having illicit connection with this woman. I said, you should marry her, better you marry her.
Bali Mardana disse assim, mas o que eu disse para ele foi que você está tendo conexões ilícitas com essa mulher, melhor que você se case com ela.
So he tweaked it.
E ele mudou a história um pouco.
But he was
Mas-
so expert
Ele era tão perito
that I was in the room the next
que
day
eu estava no quarto no dia
in a
seguinte,
Spiritual Sky office next,
no escritório da Spiritual Sky.
and Jayadwaita, Tosan,
Jayadwaita Toshan,
I don't want to mention so many names, but three of them, I forget.
três
The
deles.
third one might have been Gohari. And they said they were all envious. They said they would have done that in a minute. If Prabhupada, they could get Toyota, and she's going to spend so much money on ISKCON. They were so envious that he had done this great service. He was so expert at tweaking everyone's mind so that they just really thought he was doing the greatest thing and that she was Toyota. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, and my mother came to a Sunday feast one time, and I told her, I said, she's Toyota. And my mother said, yeah, you don't believe that, do you? And I remember what he told me about the
E
old lady and different things.
os devotos que estavam contra Bali Mardana, ele dizia que eles eram invejosos porque ele estava casado com essa moça da Toyota, e a mãe de Pushkar veio para o templo um dia e Pushkar falou, ela é da família da Toyota, e a mãe dele falou, você não acredita nisso, você acredita?
Because then I remembered the different things that happened. Like when I was in India, I didn't think about it too much at all. But I remember what a rascal he was, that he was saying Prabhupada didn't know the situation and all the different things he was doing, strange. He collected a lot of money, and he was going to buy it. One time we were chanting in front of a Time and Life building, huge, skyscraper. And he said he was going to buy that with the Toyota money.
Uma vez nós estávamos fazendo Harinama
He was
em
holding
New York,
her hand.
New York.
Yeah, in
Ele
Manhattan.
estava em Manhattan, ele estava segurando a mão dessa senhora E eles pararam na frente de um edifício muito grande e Bali Maharaj disse que ele ia comprar aquele edifício com o dinheiro da Toyota.
Another time he sent me and Parikshit to see a church
Outra vez ele me mandou eu e Parikshit para ver uma igreja
in a very posh part of Manhattan, upper class.
numa área de alta classe de
And
Manhattan.
he said he was going to buy
E
that.
ele disse que eu vou comprar isso.
And
essa
ultimately,
igreja.
Prabhupada took all of his money
E no final Prabhupada tirou todo o dinheiro dele,
and he used it to buy Juhu land.
usou para comprar a terra de Juhu em Bombay.
So Prabhupada was very clever.
Prabhupada era muito esperto.
He knew that this guy was a rascal.
Prabhupada sabia que ele
If
era
anybody has
patife.
any doubt, you can find, it's not in the archives, but luckily it's on a videotape where Prabhupada talks about if you do intrigue and you play diplomacy with Guru, you might get material thing, but your spiritual life will be lost. And he was,
Isso talvez não esteja nos archives, mas está num vídeo que Prabhupada disse, say again, if you do,
diplomacy and intrigues.
se você usa diplomacia e intrigas,
And yeah, tricks. If you try to trick
truques,
the Guru.
se
But,
você tenta enganar o Guru.
so that tape took place after I left, but Prabhupada gave a very heavy lecture. I always thought I had the only cassette, I lost it. And but then I found out when I was mentioning that I lost it one day, Divyanga said, no, it's on the video that Pancharatna took.
Eu tinha gravado essa aula sobre isso, mas eu perdi. E quando eu estava comentando com Vidyanga que a única fita foi perdida, ele falou, não, mas a Pancharatna fez um vídeo, e tem o vídeo.
So it was saved on that video.
E foi gravado naquele vídeo.
And I'm not even sure if the archives
não sei se
has
está
it
nos
on their-
archives.
on their audio tape. But
Se os arquivos Bhaktivedanta
I-
têm em fita.
I don't think they had it last time I checked. I can
A
ask
última
them.
vez que eu verifiquei, eles não tinham.
In any case, Prabhupada says they're very heavy because they were chanting Guru the Charana Padma. He said, but you don't know the meaning.
Prabhupada disse na aula que você está cantando Shri Guru Charanapadma, mas você não sabe o significado.
Anyone can check, but anyway, it's interesting.
Okay, it's
What do you
now
Late.
7:52 p.m. Agora são quase 8 horas
You're
da
going to use
tarde.
all this?
Yeah.
I have a lot more.
Just one thing, I actually interviewed Toshan about this, Bali Mardam. And he followed Bali Mardam all the way to Hawaii and found out that Bali Mardam was using BBT checks to stay in a hotel with this woman.
Yeah, he said she said she owned this IKEA, it's called the Ilokai Hotel, and she said her father owned it. And they convinced everyone that he owned it, and she stayed in a big penthouse, but actually they were using the temple money from New York.
Essa mulher convenceu todo mundo que a família dela era dona de um hotel no Havaí, mas quando Toshan investigou, ela ficou no Havaí com Bali Mardam e pagou com o cheque do BBT. Eu entrevistei Toshan pessoalmente, Toshan disse que preparou toda uma documentação e quando Bali Mardam ficou sabendo, expulsou ele do templo, mas Toshan deu a documentação para Gopal Krishna, que ia para a Índia, pediu para Gopal Krishna dar para Prabhupada a documentação, mostrando todas as coisas ilícitas que Bali Mardam fazia. Gopal Krishna deu para Prabhupada, eventualmente Bali Mardam foi expulso do templo, e Prabhupada disse para os devotos, isso ficou famoso, que você deve render tudo para a sua autoridade, exceto a sua inteligência.
Anyway, it's a long story.
Well, thank you very much, Pushkar Prabhu. That was exciting. I learned so many things.
Because Bali Mardam, he still goes to India, and he's still a devotee.
Yeah. I heard he's going to New York, to the New York temple.
Yeah, but he didn't. He lives in Buffalo. He didn't come to Rath Yatra, last few years. So.
Mas Bali Mardam ainda é devoto e
Even the lady showed up in 1985 or 6. I was in
até
Los Angeles.
essa senhora apareceu em Los Angeles em 1985, 86.
And she saw me and she knew
Ela
me.
me viu, ela me conhecia.
It was a very weird feeling to see her.
Era uma situação estranha revê-la.
And she had an Indian lady who was her servant.
Ela tinha uma indiana como serva.
The lady's name was Yashoda.
E o nome da senhora era Yashoda.
And as soon as the lady got me on the side, she asked me
No momento que essa indiana me chamou do lado para
she asked me
conversar,
if Bali Mardam was Indian.
se Bali Mardam era
Of
indiano,
course he wasn't. So she might have been saying he
ele
was.
realmente não era.
And then she also asked if she had quadruplets. She was still
E
talking about
também
this.
ela perguntou se essa senhora tinha tido quadruplos.
So I thought, this is amazing. She's still
Ela
talking
pensou, ela
this
ainda
insane
fala sobre essa
Anyway,
insanidade.
the same time she was sentimental about Prabhupada and wanted to see the old devotees that she knew, but
Mas ao mesmo tempo ela era sentimental, tinha sentimentos por Prabhupada e queria ver todos os devotos que ela havia conhecido.
the devotees didn't mostly. I brought her to see Parikshit, but he wouldn't even look at her.
Eu a levei para ver Parikshit, mas Parikshit nem queria vê-la.
Anyway,
Prabhu, I thank you very much.
Jai.
Thank you. Muito obrigado a todos. Passamos um pouco da hora, mas estava emocionante. Pushkar tem muitas e muitas mais histórias além disso. E na próxima entrevista vamos fazer com Ananga Manjari, que era a esposa de Hridayananda Maharaj antes dele se casar, antes dele tomar sannyas, desculpe. Next program will be with Ananga Manjari, to be announced, and she used to be the wife of Hridayananda Maharaj before he took sannyas. Hare Krishna.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna,